Welcome everybody to another episode. Today we're going to talk about workplace violence prevention and intervention programs. It's a very important topic. Every organization needs to have one, but almost every organization we work with falls into the three same key problems that we see across the board. So today we're going to talk with the team a little bit and discuss a little bit about what those three most likely problems are that we're seeing across all industries.
What you got, Stacy Brown?
Yeah, so three most common issues across the industry. Well, I'll tell you, so when we do, of course, when an organization signs on with us to build a program, the first thing we do is an assessment, right? So try to figure out where are your gaps, also where are your strengths, what are you doing really well, let's lean into those, and then let's identify some of these gaps. Almost always the biggest gap is in frontline manager and leader training. Now we know within the space of prevention, that is the key piece in identifying these behaviors or identifying somebody that's on the pathway towards violence. And so that's always a tough one because people are like, well, I give this general employee training or awareness training to all employees. And so we're covering the basis there. And it's like, your managers and leaders need to understand exactly what they're looking for, because if I recognize something's off in one of my coworkers, guess who the first person is that I'm going to? My manager or supervisor. And if they don't know what to do about it, then that is a key problem in the space of prevention. So that's one of the biggest ones.
You're saying the training for your frontline managers is different training than your frontline folks would receive.
Yeah, it's a little bit more honed in on threat awareness, so enhanced threat awareness. So specifically, like, yes, we're looking at these key indicators, but it's almost like the first tier of threat management team training. If you're reporting these situations up to the threat management team, what is it that they're looking for? Well, some of these key indicators are, increased substance abuse, or, having, maybe some issues at home, or some bigger past violence incidents, or whatever it might be. Like your frontline manager or supervisor, because of the relationships they've built or how long they know everybody, they have that pulse on the organization. So they're probably going to know when, something is just not right in one of these individuals. It's a change from that baseline behavior. So yes, an employee might recognize one or two of them, but a frontline manager or leader is going to say, this is actually becoming a concern. Let's report this up to those that can do a threat assessment.
They're actually the ones putting some of that puzzle together to see what's going on. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
There's such a bridge. I mean, we commonly go to our supervisor, granted that we feel comfortable, when we have a problem. And so if they're going to be one of the first recipients of this information, we want them to be able to handle it well, because what's a common approach we hear about? Yeah, got it. It's probably nothing. Or they will just procrastinate and things get worse, or they try to handle it themselves and don't do it well because they're not understanding of what could make these things exacerbated. So,
or not even understanding their policies, because a lot of times they'll say,
right.
I hear often people will say, like, hey, we don't tolerate that here. You can't act like that here.
Yeah, if you peel somebody and that expands the grievance, if there is one there. And yeah, I mean, there's such a bridge to, and also the from a cultural standpoint, some of that first leadership capability to implement the program like organizationally wide. Like, yes, we have all of our frontline folks. We want them to have the certain behaviors and everything else. But that first threshold, managers and supervisors, it's like they're the ones carrying that torch initially on behalf of the organization, trying to establish the end state of this program.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Even maybe to the complete opposite of, like, we don't tolerate that here, is you get a mid-level manager or something that has no idea how to deal with something, which plays into the cultural piece. They don't know how to deal with it, so they just don't. They just let stuff go, don't address it, don't take care of it, don't deal with it because they have never received the training or have the knowledge of how to deal with that. That's a great point.
And in this space, what we know about when an incident takes place, almost always you can trace it back to a grievance.
Right.
And that grievance usually is formed from a breakdown of communication. And so in line with that, and I think this is why in our awareness training and managers and leaders training, we do a deeper dive into it, but is the de-escalation, conflict resolution skills. So having, those communication skills in the workplace, the conflict resolution skills can really stop those grievances from ever forming in the first place. So that's another key indicator.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot of stuff that really falls down to that level of management, that level of leadership that with some good training would help so much throughout the entire program, right? Because, and to the point where it's important, I think, for people to know, it's like building a program. It's just that it's building an entire program. It's not just putting a policy in place. It's not just writing some protocols for something. It's actually building your program, but being able to implement that program throughout your organization.
Yeah.
What do you got, Jake?
I mean, well, it just kind of gets into the second point that I wanted to share with folks is so often the approach with these programs is it's punitive. It's leaning heavily on the disciplinary side. And, to your point, where if there is a grievance or there is an issue, a leader can be heavy-handed or just like, boom, they just bring the hammer when this is probably exactly what we don't want for this program. So it's like, well, that is appropriate discipline for certain things, but when it starts talking about when it starts applying to, we have some concerning behaviors here, or, we have somebody that is hurting, somebody that is progressing towards potential violence. And this isn't even necessarily towards potential homicide or mass shooting. This can be towards a fist fight, or, you have something building up where it's about to get real. And you have a leader that comes into the situation and just takes a punitive approach to all of these different things. Well, if that is what breeds into the culture, you wonder why you're going to have a lot of violence and, these kinds of things happening on a regular basis. And so it's so important that, people understand that it's not a punitive program when done well, when set up effectively. In fact, the opposite is true. It's got to be measured towards the individual circumstances at hand. And from the other side of the spectrum, that's the cultural piece. It's like, that's how you positively adapt these to the culture, or adapt this issue to the culture, so that, people can de-escalate these issues and avoid these things from getting worse.
Yeah, and to tie it back one more time is, even if you do identify that, yes, this person is exhibiting behaviors of concern, and yes, they are on that pathway. Well, let's say the threat management team gets them intervention. They're going back again to that manager or leader and saying, hey, is the intervention working? Are they still exhibiting behaviors of concern? Are things continuing to escalate, or have things kind of simmered down and gotten better? So the frontline managers and leaders really do play a huge key in prevention. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
And so often you see them getting the same training the frontline folks are.
No doubt.
Time and time again. And it seems like every time I get asked this a lot dealing with clients, like where do you see the biggest gaps? And that definitely ends up being my answer. So quite often. But, Jake, you do a lot of the executive level training for the organizations. And I know, another problem that gets brought up to us often, whether it's, our HR folks, our security folks, but getting buy-in from executive teams being a significant problem. Quite often, whether it's for funding or for a cultural shift or whatever it is. Like, what's your experience with that? How do you find that people can get buy-in from executive teams, or maybe even interacting with some of the executive teams? What's the take on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, if you're managing this program, if you're trying to implement this program, you have to understand what the critical objectives of the organization are, and then align this program or this purpose with those critical objectives. And so if you have the fallout of some of these different things, maybe the objective is a certain revenue threshold. Maybe the critical objective is to have so many units of merchandise go out. Whatever those objectives are, well, how would a mass casualty event, or how would continued violence impact that objective from being accomplished? So how can implementing this program create that certainty? So if you can create that connection for those objectives, it helps them see the value in doing something like this. So it's kind of asking those couple of questions. It's what are those critical objectives? And then secondly, how can this program create certainty that those objectives will be will be accomplished. And then, by doing that, you're putting this program on the radar of the highest levels of the organization. That's one way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tactically, there's also the issue of just painting the full picture. And this is one of the things when we're talking about what programs get wrong. Well, if you're trying to get executive buy-in and just coming to them with, well, we need to implement active shooter training, or we need to implement a policy. It goes back to what you're talking about, Corey. And that is, we have to address this across the spectrum. Yes, it is policies. Yes, it is training. But there's a much bigger spectrum here. It's a full program with several implements included to address the problem holistically. And doing that allows executive management to really get behind it and be like, okay, I see the full picture here.
That's interesting. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be something as significant, from a financial aspect as like a mass shooting at your place of business to have a significant financial impact. It's all these little things that can add up too, and making sure that they understand that. I mean, you look at the most recent incivility report, and almost 2/3 of frontline folks don't trust that, and bringing it back to our first point again, is don't trust that the mid-level management can handle situations that they're dealing with. Therefore, those situations continue to escalate to the point where now it's in an incivility report. Now it's affecting the job performance of people. People don't want to come in. People don't want to work there. High turnover, absolutely. And that has a huge financial impact on organizations.
Yep. If you keep having folks that, to your point, let's say there's fistfights or harassment or aggression that occurs, and you keep having workers' comp claims, and people are injured for an extended period of time, and the company's on the hook for those payments over the course of a significant amount of time, that adds up. That hits the company in a different way. And so it's not necessarily one of those things that you think about or that hits the news, but if you have people that are getting hurt and missing work because of this issue, that'll start adding up a lot more than what you'd want it to as well. So it's like, if you just make the investment to get ahead of these things and build a positive work environment, it'll help derail a lot of those things from hopefully happening.
Yeah, those are all great points. If you're trying to get ahead of violence in your particular workplace, making sure you take care of your policy and know that it's more than just a policy. It's about implementing it into your organization, controlling that culture, get your frontline folks some training, leaders training specifically for them, and get that buy-in from your executive team. These are all extremely important things on how to build out the best program possible. If you want more information about it, by all means, go ahead and reach out. Subscribe to our newsletter. It's called The Centerfold. You can go onto our website, cpps.com, subscribe to the newsletter, like and share the video, all the things. And until next time, see you later.